Tonight on Huckabee, 5 Taliban bad guys free to go in the swap for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. Will the president release all prisoners from Gitmo?
He would face severe consequences, Mr. President. Don't do that.
Senator Lindsey Graham on why such a move could lead to impeachment. And the chief of the operations center that dropped everything to help find Bergdahl, Major Rusty Bradley, says he has no doubt the 5 released detainees will kill again. Plus,
I gave thanks to God for these great students, their parents, their teachers, and for this community.
Why a high school principal has atheists seeing red. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Mike Huckabee.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And welcome to Huckabee from the Fox News studios in New York City. One of the funniest and yet painfully poignant cartoons that I saw this week was this little internet dandy right here. Now, it proposes to Mexico that we trade 5 Democrats for 1 Marine stuck down there in Mexico. All right, the initial reaction to a soldier being released was to thank God and be grateful, and especially be glad for his family. I'm still glad the young man is out of the hands of the Taliban and is going to return home. Now, if he indeed deserted, and if he turned from his oath of loyalty to America and to his fellow soldiers, then the full weight of the law should rain down on him. The families of those soldiers who were killed looking for him will never be fully comforted by whatever punishment might be meted out for Sergeant Bergdahl. And those 5 terrorists that we turned loose will likely kill again. I'm not sure what words of comfort President Obama could give to the families of those future victims of these horrible monsters. Now, many questions yet have to be resolved. Why did the president act in direct violation to the law that required him to notify Congress at least 30 days in advance of some detainees' release at Gitmo? Even the president's sympathizers can't deny that he clearly broke the law with his actions, although some defend it because of the argument that Bergdahl was sick and needed immediate medical attention. Why did he violate our long-standing policy and even negotiate with terrorists at all? Does that not endanger more Americans from capture so they can become hostages to pressure the president to open more doors from the lockup at Guantanamo Bay? If we traded 1 suspected deserter for 5 of the worst thugs in Gitmo, imagine what power the terrorist would have in kidnapping an ambassador, a ranking officer serving honorably, or for that matter, an innocent American teenage tourist just tooling around Europe on spring break. And why is it that Susan Rice was once again made into the White House stooge, this time peddling yet another ludicrous and laughable line about Bergdahl being rescued with the swap of the terrorist? Because
he served the United States with honor and distinction.
Well, she, or at least the people who trotted her out there again with a notebook full of claptrap, must have known that honor and distinction means something different to our military. And allegedly walking off from one's post to join up with the enemy is neither. I honestly expected her to blame some YouTube video for his walking off the post and creating the crisis. But there is one unanswered question that this curious case brings up. And forgive my cynicism. Was it to take the disgusting and outrageous maltreatment of our veterans in the VA system off the front page and somehow make the president look like a hero for getting a soldier out of captivity? The president and members of his team have repeatedly justified their hostage swap of terrorists because we leave no man behind. Well, America doesn't desert its soldiers, apparently even if they desert us. So then here's my question for the president, and honest to God, I really want an answer. If you were this committed to saving Sergeant Bergdahl, so much so that you would break the law and let 5 mad dogs loose, then why? Why on God's green earth didn't you do something to rescue the 4 Americans slaughtered at Benghazi? Why? Why, Mr. President, did you roll over, go to sleep, and fly off on Air Force One the next day for a Las Vegas political fundraiser instead of moving heaven and earth to save Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, and Glenn Daugherty? That is the real question. I hope you'll answer it. Republicans and Democrats have been outraged over the president's move to release the 5 Taliban prisoners from Gitmo without congressional approval. My first guest says there should be consequences if the president releases more prisoners on his own. And he told The Hill this. He said it's going to be impossible for them to flow prisoners out of Gitmo now without a huge backlash. There will be people on our side calling for his impeachment if he did that. Well, I spoke to Senator Lindsey Graham earlier. Senator, this past Wednesday, you made a rather startling statement that if the president were content to continue allowing Gitmo prisoners to go free, as we've seen this past week, that you think that there would be Republicans calling for an impeachment. Do you stand by that statement, that this could be that big of an issue?
Well, the question, Mike, was what if the president just unilaterally emptied the jail at Gitmo? We have restrictions on prisoners going back to Yemen. We have notification requirements. We have restrictions about bringing these prisoners back into the United States that were bipartisan in nature. So if the president tried to empty the jail, it would be a constitutional crisis of great proportion between the Congress's power and that of the president. The 30-day notice requirement is a debatable issue, but we do have the ability as Congress to deal with detainee matters, and so there's many restrictions on Gitmo. If he just decided to empty the jail one day because he was tired of the war, it would be a backlash on both parties, and he would face severe consequences. I hope he will not do that, Mr. President. Don't do that.
Well, he's clearly wanted to get rid of Gitmo from the beginning. He campaigned on that basis, said he was going to do it within 30 days. It's been 6 years. He hasn't done it.
Yeah.
Is this a political move on his part, or is this a sincere effort because he wanted to get Bergdahl out of Afghanistan?
Well, all I can say is that the deal is dangerous for America. This is an incredibly bad deal. You know, this president embraced a noble concept in the military that we don't leave people behind. But even greater than that in the military is that we don't undercut the war effort and we don't put our nation at risk. No soldier wants their country to be at risk when they get captured. We've let loose 5 Taliban hardened killers, the hardest of the hard, the Taliban dream team that worked with al-Qaeda to help plan the attacks of 9/11. These are the people who killed women in soccer stadiums for sport. Can you imagine how young women in Afghanistan must feel today that our country let these killers loose? All those that fought along our side, how they must feel in Afghanistan. And can you imagine the threats that Americans face today because of this precedent of dealing with terrorists? And every American serving overseas is subject to being kidnapped now, and the Taliban commander acknowledged that to Time magazine. This is a very bad deal for America, and this is the same president who embraces never leaving anybody behind, but never picked up the phone during the night of the Benghazi attack to call for help in Libya, and was virtually AWOL. So I want to thank you for keeping Benghazi alive.
You know, as we talk about the fact that these guys have been let out, you've made it very clear, Senator, that these aren't just some Bush League terrorists,
right.
You know, that got picked up for speeding. These are some really the worst of the worst. So does that give you concern that it wasn't just negotiation for, you know, a few guys who were marginal, but some of the leaders?
I think he was looking for an opportunity to get rid of some of the bad guys. He wants to close Gitmo to a fault. I want to keep Gitmo open and hold terrorists who would kill us all. It would have been fine with me, Mike, if these guys had died in jail. We're at war with radical Islam. The Taliban is a partner of al-Qaeda that attacked our country. The recommendations from our military and intelligence community is not to release these guys. They did not reform themselves, so there was no evidence that they became safe to release all of a sudden. I think he tried to do two things in 1 week. End the war in Afghanistan by declaring our withdrawal by 2016, which will be a disaster for us. We've told the enemy when we're going to leave. We should have had a couple of bases left in Afghanistan as a line of defense against future attacks for us as an insurance policy. And he also wanted to announce that he retrieved the only captive. Well, what he didn't realize that most Americans are just really upset that we let 5 hardened killers committed to our destruction who've killed Americans, war criminals, back onto the battlefield. Within a year, they'll be back in Afghanistan, and God help the people of Afghanistan. The president really hurt our own national security. This was a dumb and dangerous decision.
Senator, you have the kind of unique distinction. You've served in the JAG arm of the military for many, many years.
Sir.
And so there are a couple of questions. There have been reports. Our own James Rosen this week reported that Bergdahl had converted to Islam and that had declared himself to be an enemy. Now, again, those are reports that have been published. Right. They've been leaked out. I want you to speak to it from the standpoint of the military process. Does this change anything? How should the military process and deal with Bergdahl if, in fact, he deserted his post and ended up joining with the Taliban, joining with the enemy? What does that do?
Okay, this is a very good question. One, you and I believe in the rule of law for everyone. So this man deserves due process. When he gets home, he will be part of a 15-6 investigation. You've heard from members of his unit about what they think happened. He will have a chance to provide information on his own behalf. And if there's evidence of a crime here, his commander can convene a court-martial, and he will be assigned counsel. He should not be tried on television or on the internet. But let me just say this. When someone deserts their unit in a time of war, that can be a capital offense under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Article 85. I am all for due process. Everybody is presumed innocent until guilty, but I assure you the military will investigate this man's conduct, because if the allegations are proven to be true, he put his unit at great risk, but we will not try him based on media information or internet gossip. There's a process in the military. I've been a military lawyer for 31 years, but desertion at a time of war is a capital offense under the UCMJ. That's how serious the military treats it. This man is presumed innocent, but let me just say one other thing as a military lawyer. We have the right to hold these detainees to the end of hostilities. Withdrawing from Afghanistan is not the end of the war. We're not at war with the people of Afghanistan or the government of Afghanistan. We're at war with terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and those who provide material support to Al-Qaeda like the Taliban. This war is far from over. As a matter of fact, the enemy is stronger today than they've ever been. So the end of hostilities will not be when we withdraw, but when the day Al-Qaeda surrenders. And we're a long way from there, pal. We could hold these guys as long as necessary to protect this country under the law of war, and I hope the president realizes that.
Senator, one final question. Do you think that this whole thing blew up in the president's face and that he underestimated the reaction to the release of those 5 terrorists?
At the end of the day, I think there was a political dynamic to this. The Rose Garden ceremony blew up in his face because here's what the president doesn't understand. Radical Islam hasn't been decimated. It is on the march, and most Americans want these guys off the battlefield, stay in jail, and they're upset that we traded 5 hardened killers under this circumstance to go back to the fight, to put our country at risk. Not only is he weak and decisive as a commander-in-chief, Mike, I think he is now detached and dangerous as a commander-in-chief.
The commander of the operations center that scrambled to help in the search of Bo Bergdahl just hours after he walked off his base in Afghanistan, Major Rusty Bradley, is going to tell us the behind-the-scenes story of what really went down. That's coming up next, so stay with us. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show and share with me your thoughts, I welcome your response. Go to my website, MikeHuckabee.com. You can connect with me on Facebook, sign up to follow my regular messages on Twitter, or leave comments on the feedback section at MikeHuckabee.com.